Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our budget workshop number 4. If we could all please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thanks everybody for coming out for our budget workshop number 4, and we'll turn this over the entire day to Ms. Paul.
Thank you, Bruce. Appreciate it. I got the next one. I'm glad you know. That's right.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our 4th budget workshop for the 26-27 school year. Since the tax cap was implemented in 2012, school districts have followed a very defined formula to build their annual budgets. We begin by calculating our restricted tax levy. We went over that in detail in our first budget workshop. That represents the amount that we're committed to collect in taxes from our taxpayers. Next, we factor in any state aid that we anticipate receiving. We then include any additional revenue that the district expects to generate. And after that, we include appropriated fund balance, which is the money that's set aside to support next year's budget. And we also consider any amounts that we're going to use from our reserve funds to help us balance the budget. So when combined, all of those components determine the total expenditure budget that we're allowed to have for the upcoming school year. School districts rely on 3 main sources of revenue. The largest source is property taxes. That makes up the majority of our local funding. The amount we can collect is limited, as you know, by the tax cap, which sets the amount that the levy can increase each year. State aid is the second major source of revenue, which can either be formula-driven, that's like a foundation aid, or expense-driven, such as a BOCES aid or a transportation aid. How much we get paid the following year depends on how much we spend in the current year. The third source of revenue comes from various local sources. These include things like interest earnings, non-resident tuition, rental income, since we have buildings that we rent out, and pilot payments. Pilot stands for payments in lieu of taxes. It's when a commercial property owner just makes an agreed upon payment instead of making traditional tax payments for a set period of time. And in our district, we only have that one pilot payment for the veterinary office on Sunrise Highway. So together, these 3 revenue sources make up the foundation of how we operate our schools. So to better understand how that breaks down in our district, we can look at our funding profile. Here in West Islip, our profile is made up of approximately 68% property taxes, 25.5% state aid, 2.8% in local revenue, and 3.7% comes from reserves and fund balance. So as you can see, our primary source of revenue is property taxes, which makes up more than 2/3 of our overall funding. Okay. Before we get into the details of the budget, I'd just like to briefly review some key terms related to school taxes. The tax levy is the amount of property taxes that the district must raise each year. So for 26-27, our tax levy will be $98.7 million. It's important to note that the tax levy is not the same thing as the tax rate. The tax rate is used to calculate how much an individual property owner pays in taxes. The tax rate is calculated using 3 different factors. You have your tax levy, the assessed property values, and homestead percentages. So the district sets the tax levy, but the town of Islip provides the assessed values and homestead percentages each year, each October. So since those numbers are not yet final, we use an estimated tax rate during the budget process. So for 2026-27, the estimated tax rate is $21.72 per $100 of assessed value. So a home's assessed value represents a percentage of its market value. That's determined through the town's equalization rate here in Suffolk County. So for 25-26 school year, the equalization rate here in West Islip is 7.1%. So that just means that homes are assessed at 7.1% of their market value. So when we refer to the average assessed home in West Islip being $45,000, That simply means that it has a market value of approximately $634,000, because you just take the $45,000 and you divide it by your equalization rate of 7.1. In Suffolk County, properties are classified as homestead or non-homestead properties. Homestead is all your residential properties and vacant land that's 10 acres or less. And your non-homestead is primarily the commercial properties. The balance between these two categories affects how the overall tax burden is distributed. And here in West Islip, as you can see, our homestead percentage is 88%. It did dip down a little bit since last year. That means most of the tax burden falls upon the taxpayers in West Islip. This is just a summary of our tax levy. Again, we went over this in detail in our first budget workshop. Our tax levy for next year is $98.7 million. That's a 2.5% increase. And as we work to develop a balanced budget, we faced several challenges that contributed to a significant budget gap. Inflation was one of the biggest factors, and like many households, our district continues to see rising costs across every area of our budget. And over the past 4 years, the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, increase has been 4.4%, while the average tax levy increase for West Islip has been 2.2%. So our tax levy has grown at nearly half the rate of inflation. It just highlights the growing gap between the rising costs and the limited revenue growth that we have here in West Islip. This slide is just showing you the proposed 26-27 tax levy impact to the average homeowner. Again, the average home is assessed at $45,000 here in West Islip. So based on our current estimates, the average homeowner would see an annual increase of approximately $246.15. That's $20.51 a month. That estimate is based on the proposed tax levy and the current assessed values and homestead percentages, since those final figures don't come out until October. And if you want to ever estimate your own local school taxes, the formula is in that yellow box right there, if you live in Suffolk County. This slide is comparing our state's 26-27 executive budget proposal that is not yet final, we do not have final numbers yet, to our current 25-26 budget. So at this time, the numbers are subject to change. We are hoping that the foundation aid increase will be 2% rather than the initial 1% proposed increase. This budget does assume a 2% increase in foundation aid. So for budgeting purposes, we did plan on that because there has been a lot of discussion that change hopefully will come to fruition. And most of our expense-based aids, as you can see, are projected to increase, while building aid is projected to slightly decrease about 6%. Overall, though, it is a positive increase of about 1.76%, or $636,000. This is all of the other revenue that we generate in West Islip School District. The increase in other student fees is really driven by the higher participation fees for enrichment programs that we're going to implement, as well as that introduction of a participation fee for the elementary summer investigation program. So that's why you see a large increase there. There is a decrease in tuition from other districts, and that is really just a result of changes in special ed services for those students in non-public schools. The increase in health services revenue just reflects higher staffing costs associated with providing all of those mandated health services to those students. And rental income also shows a significant increase, and that's due to renegotiated lease agreements with some of our tenants. Interest income is projected to decrease nearly 10%, just based on current interest expectations. But overall, we are looking at an increase of about 6.6% in other revenue. This slide is focusing on the district's restricted reserves, because those are the reserves we're allowed to use to help us fund our budget gap, and we did. As of June 30th, 2025, that's the last year, our last fiscal year when it was audited, you can see that the total is approximately $18.8 million for these reserves. And during the current school year, we're appropriating $4.4 million from these reserves. So not including any required interest or potential fund balance allocation that we will do at the end of this school year, we estimate that these balances will decline to roughly $14.4 million by the end of the school year. And for next year, 26-27, we are planning to appropriate from these reserves an additional $4.5 million. So these appropriations include funding from our EBLR reserve, TRS, ERS, and workers' compensation. This will help us offset pension costs and employee-related costs. In some cases, as you can see, specifically the TRS and the workers' compensation reserve, we are bringing these reserves down very significantly. Overall, between the current and upcoming school years, these reserves will be reduced by nearly half. So while reserves are an important budgeting tool, I think this just illustrates that they are a finite resource and they really are not a long-term solution to sustain recurring expenditures. This slide is just bringing us back to that initial budget formula, just with all of our numbers from the current school year, comparing it to the projected for next year. So for the upcoming school year, as I mentioned, that tax levy is increasing in the allowable levy limit to 2.5% at $98.7 million. We did incorporate our projected state aid, with assuming that 2% increase in foundation aid. We are looking at a projected other revenue of $4.1 million, and we are planning to use $4.5 million of restricted reserves, and our appropriated fund balance is remaining at $850,000. So when you add all of these components up, our expenditure budget for next school year is $144,810,058. That's a 2.38% increase. This slide breaks down all of our budgets by category. We're required to break it into 4 main areas: instruction, undistributed, general support, and transportation. The instruction category is pretty self-explanatory. It's all direct costs that support our K-12 instructional program. It includes regular and special education. It, of course, represents the largest piece of the budget, which is 53.45%. The undistributed category includes employee benefits, debt service, transfers to other funds for capital projects that we do internally through the budget, and the district share of providing a summer special education program. And that accounts for about 29.67% of the budget. And the general support category just covers the overall operation and administration of our district. It includes legal services, insurance, auditing, central office functions, superintendent, human resources, the business office, and all of those related functions. And that represents just under 12% of the budget. And the transportation category includes all costs associated with transporting our general and special education students to our public schools, private schools, parochial, and that makes up about 4.9% of our budget. So as you can see, the majority of the budget is dedicated to instruction, followed by our essential support services that are needed to operate our schools. So to address our budget gaps this year, as we went over in detail in our previous workshops, we did implement a series of necessary adjustments that are summarized on this slide. Every decision was made with a priority on minimizing the impact to students as much as possible. A significant portion of our savings did come from staffing adjustments through attrition. So as positions become vacant due to retirement or resignation, some were not replaced. Those included roles throughout our custodial, maintenance, clerical, and instructional departments. In addition, some positions were accessed. That includes 1 administrative role and 3 teaching positions. We also identified operational efficiencies across the district. We reduced school safety coverages during non-instructional times and scaled back spending on all departments, supplies, and equipment where feasible. Some changes are going to be more visible to families. For example, the district will no longer cover the IB and AP exam fees, and there were certain adjustments to those program fees, including a slight increase in the enrichment and adult education fees, along with that introduction of the participation fee for the elementary summer investigation program. And finally, we continue to rely on our reserves to help us fund our budget. And this year, we're going to be appropriating $4.5 million to support the budget. So what are the things in the budget that are a little bit different than last year? So some highlights are, we are adding a psychologist who will also serve as the CPSC chairperson. Foundations is actually going to expand to the 4th and 5th grade. In K through 5, we are introducing Story Champs intervention, so research-based language intervention program. And to expand student opportunities at the high school, we're actually adding IB Design Technology 2, Culinary Arts 2, and Financial Literacy coursework. We are also adding a boys JV golf team at the high school, and at the middle school level, we are adding a combined flag football team for the girls. This is our projected average class sizes for the upcoming school year, and again, it's important to note that these are just estimates at this point because we are still in the process of reviewing students' needs through the CSE and CPSE evaluation program process. So as a result, adjustments can occur. On the ballot in May, you will see two propositions. The first, of course, is for the school budget vote, and the second is going to be for the use of capital reserves. And the community will also be asked to vote to elect 2 board trustees. So in May, we will have that capital reserve proposition on the ballot to authorize the use of using the 2 existing capital reserve funds that we have to do three or four different projects. The first is to install magnetic door holders at the high school. And at the middle school levels, at both schools, we will be installing electronic locks and card access readers for the classrooms and the bathrooms, which is similar to what we just did this past summer at the high school. We are also requesting funding to just complete the elementary fire alarm replacements at Bayview and Oquina. And the total of all of these projects is $1,880,000. And that represents a not to exceed authorization amount, which is just meaning that any unspent funds will simply be returned back to the capital reserves. And of course, since these projects are funded through the capital reserve with existing money already, they don't require any additional costs to the taxpayers. This is just our timeline here, some key dates. The nominating petitions for the seats for the board are available at district office, but they are due back to district office no later than April 20th at 5 p.m. The board will adopt the final budget next week on April 21st, and the annual public budget hearing will take place on May 5th. And finally, of course, our budget vote is going to be held on Tuesday at the high school, May 19th, in the gymnasium between the hours of 7 a.m. and 9 p.m. Does anyone have any questions of the stuff I provided? Or?
Do you know when the final budget will be on agreement?
Nope, I have just heard from colleagues that it seems like all of us will be adopting without the final budget. So I don't know if you've heard anything different from all.
So I'm hearing as well.
No, thank you, Mrs. Pilati. It's great work, and I know a lot has gone into this budget with the challenging decreases in state aid and not even knowing what the final is. And one of the things that I know we get questions on about the pre-K program, the expansion of the pre-K program, that still hasn't, the additional state aid, we're waiting on the final number to make sure that that state aid is in there. And we are making plans to make sure we can expand the pre-K, but we're waiting for the final budget on that. But there are some great additions. The goal of the board and the administration and all of it was to make sure that as little impact on students as possible, and I think we've done a great job doing that. Thankfully, we have the reserves, but they are getting less and less, but we do have those challenging times, but you've done a sensational job, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. All right, thanks, everybody. We'll see you on Tuesday for budget adoption.